I stood on that porch looking carried away as I handed the key to a stranger. My daughter screamed at me from the driveway. My son wouldn't look at me, but I felt something I hadn't felt in 51 years. Not grief, not guilt, relief. And I need to tell you something before I tell you anything else. I did it while Raymond was still breathing, while he was still in that hospital bed 3 miles away, with tubes in his arms and my children holding his hand. They think I went cold. I think I finally came back to life. But here's the thing nobody is asking. Why did I know before the doctors did that I was never going back to that house? Why did I have a real estate agent's number already written in my address book 6 months before Raymond ever got sick? I'm not going to answer that yet, but stay with me and kindly subscribe and share to others while you do so. My name is Evelyn Marsh. I'm 89 years old. I was married to Raymond Marsh for 51 years. He was a composed man, punctual, the kind of man who ironed his own shirts and never raised his voice and always knew exactly what he was doing. Everyone at church thought we were the picture of a long marriage. His colleagues sent anniversary cards. Our grandchildren grew up thinking their grandfather hung the moon. And for most of those 51 years, I told myself the same thing they did. I need to tell you something harder than the story you think you're about to hear. Because this isn't a story about a house. It isn't a story about money or inheritance, or a woman who cracked under grief. It's a story about a woman who finally, at 89 years old, understood what she had been living inside, and what I did about it before it was too late. I met Raymond in 1961. I was 27, working as a records clerk at a county office in Dayton, Ohio. He came in to file a land permit. Tall, careful with his words. The kind of man who read the form twice before he signed it. He asked me to dinner 3 weeks later. We married in 1963. Raymond worked in commercial real estate. The irony of that is not lost on me now. He understood property. He understood value. He understood better than anyone what things were worth and what they weren't. We built the house in 1971 on a half-acre lot outside of town. 3 bedrooms, a screened porch, a garden I planted every spring with tomatoes and zinnias. Raymond poured the concrete for the back path himself. Our son Daniel took his first steps on that path. Our daughter Carol learned to ride her bike in that driveway. I spent 51 years making that house a home. Sunday mornings smelled like coffee and the particular creak of the 3rd porch step. Raymond took his coffee black. I handed it to him every morning without asking. Same mug, same time. For 51 years I handed that man his coffee and believed it was intimacy. I believed a lot of things. I remember our 25th anniversary. Raymond took me to a restaurant we couldn't quite afford, ordered wine we didn't need, and reached across the table and held both of my hands. He said, "Evelyn, everything I've built, I built for you." I held that sentence for 26 more years, repeated it to myself whenever the distance between us felt too wide to explain. When he came home late and didn't say where he'd been, when he took phone calls in the garage with the door pulled shut, when I'd find him sitting alone in the dark and he'd say, "Just thinking," and I'd nod and go back inside, because I had learned somewhere along the way that Raymond's silence was not an invitation. That sentence was my proof. Everything I've built, I built for you. I know what he built now, and I know who he built it for. It started with a property listing, not a confession, not a letter, not a receipt in a coat pocket. A property listing, the kind Raymond would have dismissed in 30 seconds as a professional reflex. I found it in February of last year, 8 months before he got sick. I was looking for the insurance documents in his filing cabinet, the bottom drawer, the one he kept locked that I'd never once opened in 51 years, because Raymond was organized and I trusted organized men. The key was in his desk. I don't know why I tried it that day. I don't know what I expected to find. Inside there was a folder, no label. Inside the folder, a property deed, a house, 40 minutes from ours, purchased in 2004, not in our name, not in a business name I recognized, in a name I had to read 3 times before my hands stopped shaking long enough to hold the page still. Margaret Collin. I knew that name. I had met Margaret Collin exactly once, in 2003, at a company dinner Raymond had asked me to attend. She was younger. She worked in his office. She shook my hand, held eye contact a beat too long, and said, "Raymond talks about you." I had thought it was a compliment. Raymond had purchased her a house in 2004. Not just purchased, built. 3 bedrooms, a screened porch. I found the construction invoices. I found the landscaping receipts. I found a birthday card in Raymond's handwriting that said, "Finally, something that's just yours." We built our house in 1971. He built hers in 2004. I went back through 30 years of memory with new eyes, and everything I found I kept in a separate folder of my own. The regional sales trips to Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, always the same rotation, always the same schedule. And now I understood the schedule. The small gifts he brought me from every trip. Now I understood why the gifts were always small. They were management. They were just enough. The 25th anniversary dinner. Everything I've built, I built for you. I sat in that filing cabinet room for 4 hours. I didn't cry. I didn't make a phone call. I wrote down a real estate agent's number and I put it in my address book. And I closed that drawer and cooked dinner and put his coffee mug on the counter for morning. And I did not say a single word, because I needed to understand one thing before I moved. I needed to know, how long had I been a feature of Raymond's life, rather than the point of it? When I found the second folder, the one behind the first, I had my answer. 1979, 25 years before the house, 25 years before Margaret Collin's name was on a deed. There were letters going back to 1979. I won't tell you what they said. I will tell you that our youngest child, Carol, was born in 1980. I sat with that information for 8 months. Every morning I handed Raymond his coffee. Every Sunday I sat next to him in the pew. Every time my children called and asked, "How are you two doing?" I said, "Just fine." And in September, Raymond had his first cardiac event. The doctors called it moderate. They said he needed surgery, recovery, observation. They said it would be weeks. Carol flew in from Phoenix. Daniel drove up from Cincinnati. They installed themselves in my kitchen and organized a vigil schedule and made casseroles I didn't eat. And they looked at me with such careful eyes, watching for the grief that was supposed to be there. On the third day I called the agent. Her name was Patricia. I had her number memorized by then. I told her I was ready. She came to the house the next morning while my children were at the hospital. We walked every room. She told me what it would sell for. I said, "List it." Carol found out 4 days later. She called me from the hospital parking lot, her voice stripped down to something I had never heard from her before. "Mom, Dad is in there right now. He doesn't even know." I said, "I know, Carol." She said, "How can you do this? How can you be this cold?" I stood in the kitchen of that house, the kitchen where I had cooked 51 years of meals, where I had handed Raymond his coffee every morning of our adult lives, where I had stood over the sink more nights than I can count, alone, listening to him in the other room, and I felt my whole body go very, very still. Cold was not the word. Clear was the word. "Carol," I said, "I need you to sit down, and I need you to listen to me. Because there are some folders in the bottom drawer of your father's filing cabinet, and I've been carrying them by myself for 8 months, and I'm done carrying them alone." She didn't speak for a long time after I told her. Then she said, "Mom, how long did you know?" I said, "Long enough to make sure it was the last thing he ever took from me." The house sold in 19 days. Raymond came home from the hospital to an empty address. His children know why. I did not ask their forgiveness. I did not explain myself to his brother or his colleagues, or the people at church who stopped calling. I took what was mine. Every year of labor, every Sunday morning, every meal, every silence I swallowed, I converted it into the only language Raymond ever truly understood: property. Here's what I want to say to you, and I'm only going to say it once. If you are handing someone their coffee every morning and calling it love, look at what they're building when you're not in the room. Maybe you're watching this and you already know. Maybe you've had your own bottom drawer, your own folder, your own 8 months of silence. And maybe you've been waiting for someone to tell you that clarity is not coldness, that protecting yourself is not cruelty, that a woman who finally acts after 51 years is not a woman who snapped. She's a woman who waited until she was ready. Raymond died 11 weeks after the sale closed. I was not in the room. The lockbox is gone now. Someone else's children are learning to ride bikes in that driveway. I drink my coffee from a new mug, in a new kitchen, in a place that is mine in every way a place can be mine. I'm not cold. I'm 89 years old, and for the first time in half a century, I am exactly where I chose to be. If this story resonated with you, kindly share, comment, and subscribe, because I have a lot of other stories to share.